There's a long tradition in the West, whiskey's for drinking, water's for fighting.
What I'm hearing is, under this administration, a shift from those incentives for renewables back to fossil fuels. And that is not going to do any of us, really in this country, a benefit to, at the end of the day, leaning into clean energy, being dominant in that space of clean energy, protecting our national security when it comes to that clean energy as well. Would you be willing to do that?
Every American today is paying more for their electricity than they were before. So the current policy is hurting every American.
Welcome back to Wicked Problems. I am Richard Delavan, and tomorrow's the big day. President Voldemort is back, and bringing with him a whole crowd of Death Eaters to populate his cabinet, most of them billionaires, so that's super exciting. Almost none of whom have been willing to say that climate change is a problem requiring that we do anything other than drill, baby, drill. So we watched each of these 3-hour confirmation hearings, so you didn't have to. We first checked out confirmation hearings for oil fracking executive Chris Wright, who's going to be Secretary of Energy. Future Environmental Protection Agency head Lee Zeldin, who used to represent my parents' district in New York, on Long Island, and seeing how Bernie Sanders, Ed Markey, and Sheldon Whitehouse stuffed him into a locker. But he'll do what he's told. So, that doesn't really matter. Which leaves us with the final energy boss, Doug Burgum. He's been nominated for Secretary of the Interior, but don't let that fool you. Despite having, the responsibility for water rights, tribal and federal land, minerals underneath those things in the West, all things like this. Also has been named the energy czar by the incoming president-elect, who has decided that the former North Dakota governor and billionaire who made his money by selling a software company to Microsoft in 2001 is the guy that you want helping to determine national energy policy. This is a guy who we'll hear from talking about how clean coal is needed. More coal on the U.S. grid. That's exciting. And how if we don't put more clean coal and carbon capture enabled natural gas and other things on the grid, then the United States will lose the Cold War it's apparently currently in over AI to China. So there's that. So, that's working out super well. And so for each of these 3-hour hearings, we thought better to save you the trouble and bring you these highlights. As opposed to the hearing with Lee Zeldin, which was, just fun to watch of somebody who just was clearly out of their depth. Doug Burgum seemed to have the measure of a lot of the folks on the panel. The most interesting exchanges were between himself and Catherine Cortez Masto from Nevada, who put some pretty pointed questions about critical minerals and national security, which we thought were interesting. And the best pushback, I think, though, came from Maine Senator Angus King, who asked some pointed questions around, well, surely we should be talking about things like battery in order to be able to actually talk about how you make that intermittency less of an issue and something that how we increase the base load in order to be able to do that. And that gets into some interesting territory, so we'll bring you that. Oh, we're also going to be bringing you as a bonus episode our little monitoring of the good folks of the Heartland Institute. You might remember them if you're here in the UK from opening up their London office with special guests Nigel Farage and Liz Truss, the climate denying organization who, wow. The color of the sky in their world really is quite different. And I think you will be finding that, interesting when we bring that to you as a bonus episode, which you can get at wickedproblems.earth. But we start out by actually talking about the first climate crisis that's actually going to land properly on the desk of Doug Burgum, should he become an Interior Secretary. And that is what to do about the Colorado River. Because in 1926, a guy called Herbert Hoover, I remember him, so that's good, helped broker an agreement between Western states about how to use water resources from the Colorado River, whether it be orange growers in California or shepherds in Utah or folks in Colorado or people in Arizona who at this point are just trying to use that water to keep lawns alive and keep the pollen count high in Phoenix, which is very exciting. But that deal expires in 2026, which means that a new one is going to have to be negotiated, or not, leading to something like the novel The Water Knife, where I suppose you'll see a bunch of paramilitaries, National Guard between different states going to war about who gets the water from the Colorado River. Because in case you missed it, the western United States is on the way to becoming more arid than it has been in about 1 million years. So that's exciting, and less water to divide up. So, question is whether or not this is the guy, fan of clean coal, carbon capture, pipelines, the Dakota Access Pipeline, and Drill Baby Drill, whether he's the guy who's going to be able to come up with something that I'm sure all the 40 million Americans who depend on that water will be very happy with. So let's kick off with Colorado Senator John Hickenlooper, who also is a geologist, asking some pretty good questions about that at the top, followed by other folks from other affected states. Enjoy.
I want to talk a little bit about the Colorado River, and it's at least it's a 25-year drought, but a longer-term drought, and we're able to go back. This is the geologist in me, but there's sediments throughout the Grand Canyon that can be correlated, and this appears to be the worst drought in 10,000 years. I mean, this is a serious drought, and you've got 40 million people that depend on this, and we've been working aggressively with the lower basin states and the upper basin states. And one of the things I was, even before you began running for the highest office, the work that you did around water in North Dakota, where roughly it was the largest investments in water infrastructure ever, but half of it was for making sure you got clean water, and half of it was to make sure you were protecting against flood. I thought it was a great model for what the Department of Interior would have. And I think you have to kind of look at the Colorado River in that sense too. I think that the Bureau of Reclamation plays a significant role there, but I think a strong leader being able to find and incentivize those innovations of how do we make sure we're saving water and doing more with the water that we have rather than fighting over it. And there's a long tradition in the West of whiskeys for drinking, waters for fighting, as we said last week. Anyway, to speak a little bit about that, of how you look at of kind of working with the Colorado River, but there are a whole number of river basins that are in drought right now.
Yes, and we've got a tremendous water resource in this country. When we think about the Great Lakes, you think about the Columbia, you think about the Yukon, the Mississippi sometimes is flooding when the Colorado's in drought. We just maybe don't have it all in the right places at the right time, and where we've got population centers.
Over the next 50 years, it's expected that New Mexico will have 25% less water than we have had historically. And we're not alone in that. The Colorado River, which provides drinking water for 40 million people, irrigates billions of dollars worth of crops, provides essential habitat for fish and wildlife, and will likely never return to those early 20th century flows that we used to be able to expect. Through the Bureau of Reclamation, the Department of the Interior must play an active role in helping the West transition to that new water reality.
The Colorado River, a lifeline for millions across the West, faces growing threats. Effective communication and support from the Department of the Interior as states negotiate the river's future will be critical to safeguarding that vital resource.
We're going to need your engagement on Colorado River. Some important negotiations that need to stay consensus-driven in the years ahead, and a recognition, again, tapping your experience as governor, that we need federal and state agencies working collaboratively to tackle resource issues, especially water. In California, we have both the Central Valley Project, which is a federal system, the State Water Project, which is a state system that are truly interconnected. And so I introduce that to you and look forward to working with you on the water management challenges that we'll have to address together going forward.
One of the biggest interior-related issues is going to be the Colorado River. Arizona is at the heart of our national defense when it comes to shipmaking, agriculture, and food security, and of course home to the 5th largest and best city in the country. In addition, 22 of the 30 Colorado River Basin tribes are in Arizona. So rules governing the reductions to the Colorado River water expire at the end of 2026. And post-2026, operation conversations are still ongoing. The lower basin states have put forward a proposal for management of the Colorado River that shares the risk among all states. However, no agreement has been reached and leading to potential conflicts within the basin, which of course we'd all like to avoid. Would you work with Arizona parties and my office so that any determination post-2026 is not overly burdensome to any one state and is consistent with the Colorado River Compact?
Well, Senator, you bring up a really important issue, and this is with the 2026 date looming coming forward. And of course, as you know, Interior does have some specific authorities relative to helping with the lower and upper basin. I would say, as a former chair of Western Governors, I know that this has been a battle that's going on as long as there have been people in the West. People are fighting over water in the West. My experience in North Dakota has been more on the Missouri River Basin, but also we've been in some deep battles with Canada because we've got two rivers that are in North Dakota that actually flow north into Canada, the Souris River and the Red River of the North. So whether it's international or the complexities of the Missouri, I've got some good understanding and good exposure to this, but I think you can count on that we're going to look for a collaborative solution that serves everyone. It's going to also, we're going to have to look for innovation on ways on the conservation side, because we can't make more water, but if we can use what we have wisely, that's going to look for the best solutions for all.
Few enough senators actually bothered to ask him directly about climate and comparing his beliefs to some previous cabinet members of both parties. Mazie Hirono from Hawaii did just that.
President Trump has directed you to expand oil and gas drilling on a massive scale, which will lead to increased burning of fossil fuels. Now, the scientific consensus is that burning fossil fuels is a primary human cause of climate change. In 2017, then Secretary of Defense James Mattis, appointed by then President Trump, told the Senate Armed Services Committee that, quote, climate change is impacting stability in areas of the world where our troops are operating, end quote. In 2014, Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel said that climate change is a critical national security threat and a threat multiplier. Now, these are two secretaries of defense. They know something about war. Were you aware that they testified before the Senate Armed Services Committee on a number of times that burning more fossil fuel is actually going to not result in the end of wars, but could very well exacerbate and cause wars? Were you aware of this testimony?
Senator, no, I'm not aware of that specific testimony, but I do know that within fossil fuels, the concern has been about emissions, and within emissions, we have the technology to do things like carbon capture to eliminate harmful emissions.
Well, the fact of the matter is that you have military leaders who acknowledge that climate change is a major issue. And for you to take the position that you're going to engage in active actions that will result in the burning of more fossil fuel, it's troubling.
Independent Senator Angus King of Maine, I think, had probably the best exchange with Doug Burgum throughout the hearing in actually trying to tease out some of the things that he actually thinks and then pushing back a little bit on this idea that simply talking about baseload, without acknowledging that there are other technologies coming on stream that actually can address those similar concerns. I wish you'd gone further, but I'm glad at least you put it in the conversation.
I presume you believe climate change is a problem. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe that climate change is a global phenomenon for sure.
I noted the biographical material that in 2021 as governor, you set a goal for North Dakota of carbon neutrality by 2030 to be achieved in a variety of ways. And as you mentioned, you've really worked hard on the carbon neutrality of fossil fuel extraction and fossil fuel use. I'm a little worried today, though. You keep distinguishing between intermittent and baseload. Would you agree that renewable resources, solar and wind, for example, can be developed if they are adequately, if they can be integrated into the grid in a safe and reliable way?
Yes, they can, and it's not for me personally for any political reasons that I distinguish. It's just because of physics, the physics of the grid. If we don't have enough base load, and it's the base load that we have that's allowed our nation to make the investments into the intermittent.
I don't want the word. In a former life, I developed both base load and intermittent resources. I don't want the word base load to be code for no renewables. That's not what you're saying, is it?
No, we need a balance, but they cannot. The intermittent, if you want to call them renewables, is used as a positive word, but this is a fact of life, is they're intermittent. And when they're intermittent, until we have storage solutions, and we're years away from having significant enough cost-effective storage to support that, we need to have the base load, or the intermittent doesn't even have a life.
But it can be integrated. In your case in North Dakota, 35% of your electricity comes from wind power. I presume your grid works.
Well, it's super stressed as it is around the country. We're in parts of two grids. We're part of MISO going east, and we're part of SPP going west. And you can have days when the rated capacity is 30, but you got a day when the wind's blowing. The wind's blowing so hard it drives all the base load off of production. And then the next day it's 20 below and there's no wind blowing, and we got no wind, and then you got to crank up the base load again. And so
that's one of the most important reasons that we've talked about innovation. We need to work on storage. You would agree, I think, that renewables or intermittents, whatever you want to call them, plus storage equals baseload.
Yes, but right now at a much higher cost. And so then, of course, we want to not only have it be reliable, we also want to have it be affordable. And so that's part of what we have to look at as a nation, is what cost are we willing to take on to try to achieve those goals. And I believe in if it's all of the above, if we can decarbonize traditional fuels cheaper than we can subsidize some of the renewables, then that should be looked at fairly and equitably and economically, because that's a better path forward for every citizen if we can do it more affordably.
I wouldn't disagree with that, but we've talked a lot about innovation, and I'm a great believer in American innovation. And the cost, for example, of solar panels has gone from, I don't know, $70 a kilowatt down to 70 cents. I mean, battery storage, for example, in Maine, there is a project underway for an 85 megawatt, 100-hour grid scale storage at a reasonable cost, because it's not based on lithium ion, or it's based on iron. And so if we're moving into a period where innovation, I believe, will bring storage down. And of course, as you know, wind and solar are the cheapest forms of energy today on a levelized basis, understanding that storage and backup is part of that calculation. But I hope that you'll work with the Department of Energy. Mr. Wright was here yesterday, and one of his business interests was in geothermal and batteries. So I just, when I hear base load used sometimes in these contexts, it sounds like no more renewables. I don't think that's a sustainable path for this country, and it's certainly not a way of meeting the challenge of climate change, which you've acknowledged is a serious one.
No, we need all forms of electricity, and we need more of it in the very near term. And so this is not about one versus the other. This is about how do we drive forward and increase the amount of electricity we have in the country. So I'm a both all of the above in terms of our approach on how we do it, but we got to do it in a way that's we have affordability and reliability. On the storage side, there is a future, but having been in tech for 30 years, batteries get better at about 2% a year, and that's what it's been for 30 to 40 years. And there's no breakthrough that's coming. Yes, it's improving, but it's not like the microchip, which doubles in power.
It may not be Moore's law, but I think the amount of resources that are going into this research at the Department of Energy and in other places, and the development of this iron-based grid-scale storage, there are opportunities for significant baseloads. I like your answer where you said we need it all. I appreciate having that on the record.
And of course, he went on. This is with Catherine Cortez Masto from Nevada.
Not only in Nevada with jobs and growing our economy, but in contributing to our national security and bringing back manufacturing to this country, because we have critical mineral mining going on in Nevada, thanks to those pieces of legislation. We have the complete ecosystem for battery, not only manufacturing, but storage and recycling as well. And our energy now is both gas as well as solar. Solar is really one of the #1 areas that we have in the state for our energy needs, and that's why battery storage is important. So let me ask you this, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but isn't the combination of renewables plus battery storage baseload?
Yep, that's certainly the future. And again, as I said before, all the above. We need all forms of electricity. We're short of electricity in this country. We just have to make sure that we have the balance. Because if we don't have the base load, the intermittent, I'll call it unreliable, because the sun doesn't always shine, the wind doesn't always blow until we get storage, and storage is still a few years out to where we're going to be able to operate at grid scale to be able to make that work. Until we get to that time, we really have to have two systems. We have to
I agree, but if we don't have the incentives to continue that kind of research and making sure that's happening, because it's happening in Nevada right now, storage.
Yes.
I've been to the facilities, we see it. If we don't have those incentives, then we're never going to get there. And so my concern is, and what I'm hearing is, under this administration, a shift from those incentives for renewables back to fossil fuels. And that is not going to do any of us really in this country a benefit to, at the end of the day, leaning into clean energy, being dominant in that space of clean energy, protecting our national security when it comes to that clean energy as well. So I do think there is a balanced approach here, but not one at the expense of another. And I'm hopeful, based on your experience as a governor, what I just heard and I know about your state, because you found that balanced approach for energy, and every state's going to be different based on their geography, that you're going to work with states as well and not take away an opportunity where they can have that balanced approach for energy. Would you be willing to do that, even stand up to the administration when it somehow is not a benefit, what they're trying to do to a state like the state of Nevada? I'm a Republican governor, and I are in lockstep when it comes to moving forward in this space.
Well, there are certainly big opportunities in Nevada, whether it's solar, geothermal. There's a lot of opportunities, critical minerals, lots of things to work on. But I would say that the benefit to every American is if we have base load that's reliable, that works, that's part of how we have affordability. I mean, every American today is paying more for their electricity than they were before. So the current policy is hurting every American. It hasn't happened yet, but it's coming soon. More and more brownouts and blackouts because we aren't going to have the balance in the grid. And I think every senator and every governor is going to be hearing from every consumer. And so this is something we have to work on together as a priority to make sure that we restore balance to the grid.
Ah, yes. Balance to the grid, like the Force. So that's cool. But why is, all of this is justified by one very simple thing that, again, good writing to figure out how to harness this. Because everything must be put on the altar of making sure that we beat China at AI, and therefore that justifies literally anything when it comes to climate goals or energy. So you'll hear a couple of references to that coming up here.
It's an all of above, go get it done, and stop getting in the way of ourselves. And particularly with this AI the AI battle. People don't understand that what's coming right now with AI revolution is going to happen during President Trump's term, where when we have generalized intelligence that we can manufacture, it's going to affect our ability to compete with every other power. And China they permitted more than 2 coal plants a week in the first half of 2023. And they're already the world's largest emitter. So we're competing against someone who's going to create more electricity, produce more AI, and could be how we lose the Cold War with them if we don't get it on. Electricity is at the brink. Our grid is at a point where it could go completely unstable. We could be just months away from having skyrocketing prices for Americans. And of course, as we talked about in the AI arms race, we need electricity for manufacturing, and AI is manufacturing intelligence. And if we don't manufacture more intelligence than our adversaries, it affects every job, every company, and every industry. You understand this, and we've got to get to work. The permitting right now, in some of the queues in FERC for electricity, it's 7 years or longer, and it's a completely that queue in FERC is 95%. Intermittent sources and only 5% baseload. We need baseload to be able to allow the renewables to be part of the system. We've got to have the balance between those two, or the grid, which is like a giant machine, just doesn't work. And so we've got to get to work, and permitting reform and speeding permitting.
And finally, although I wish somebody had pushed back a little bit more about this, which would be to just maybe ask a follow-up question to say, like, could you, Governor Burgum, point to a single project of clean coal that's actually successfully delivering that level of carbon capture, or a carbon capture and storage project that actually is in operation at scale somewhere in the United States that's actually doing what it promised? Love to see that data. But no one did.
We know that we have the technology to deliver clean coal. We're doing that in North Dakota. Senator Hoeven and others began these efforts over 2 decades ago, but we have an opportunity to decarbonize, produce clean coal, and we, with that, produce reliable baseload for this country. And so, again, we are absolutely would want to work with you on this issue, because this is something that's critical to our national security. Without baseload, we're going to lose the AI arms race to China. And if we lose the AI arms race to China, then that's got direct impacts on our national security in the future of this country.
As Secretary of the Interior, how do you think you can use your authority to advance rules that boost innovation in the energy sector to, let's reduce methane is one thing, but I'll broaden the question, say, and getting to better, cleaner energy that's at the same time reliable and at a low cost?
Well, I should say, Mayor, Governor, Senator, I love this question, because the focus on innovation, we've seen in North Dakota, again, the federal regulation comes in, it's proposed, it goes through the rule changing, it takes years to finally get it finalized, then it gets finalized, and then all of a sudden you got a federal employee in a white pickup with a clipboard, driving around that the taxpayers are paying for, trying to find out if we've got an emission here, emission there. Meanwhile, if that's 6 to 8 years from the beginning of a problem to when the rule gets finalized and is actually enforced, we've gone through like 4 or 5 cycles of Moore's.
Get to the innovation.
We've gone through 4 or 5 cycles of Moore's Law, and then someone's got a solution to say we can do methane capture at the well, we can do it cheaply, we can do it this. They implement it, they can capture it, they can turn it into electricity, they can, do power generation for a data center on site and on a well site. I mean, the amount of innovation that is occurring right now in the energy industry is unbelievable. It's as exciting as anything in tech that's going on. And so that's why I say innovation over regulation. We can solve these problems cheaper, faster, and quicker than we can through expensive and outdated regulations.
Yeah, we've never needed more innovation in a short time than we need in energy right now. As the energies are, on the other side, there have been a lot of reports about tariffs on critical minerals, that possibly on everything. They're from all different, a lot of people are saying a lot of different things. So in terms of imposing tariffs without having a clear strategy on how we're going to secure the supply chains for these critical minerals essential to our defense, to our aerospace industry, go down the list, what's your plan to collaborate with our allies to make sure that we can ensure a reliable supply chain on these critical minerals?
Well, I think the key there is allies, because we need to be, we have to have a security network of people that are truly our allies, and we have to be able to buy and sell from each other around these critical minerals. But right now, we've been, over the last 20 years, I mean, we were, as a nation, one of the great mining economies in the world 20 years ago. It's become a dirty word. You can hardly find a kid in college that wants to go into geology or geologic or
Don't say,
mining.
you're hurting me.
Well, you were there. You
I am a geologist.
Yes, you are.
Or I was.
But you understand in your profession how that has shifted in your lifetime, and we've got to bring it back, because this is critical to our nation's future.
Well, that's it for the moment on Doug Burgum, and these are the nominees. Again, bonus episode coming out so that we can keep track of what the Heartland Institute is saying and cheerleading these folks on their way to taking office and guiding and implementing energy policy for the U.S. that will influence the rest of the world and how we actually deal or not with climate change. So, very exciting. I'm going to go and have a bit of a toast to a bit of a wake for the end of an era, whatever era we want to define this as, the last 50 years, because certainly something else is starting tomorrow. And eat, drink, and be merry. Tomorrow we die. Good luck.
So big Jim Dwyer made his last trip to the shores where his fathers lay. But 15 minutes later we had our first taste of whiskey. There was uncles giving lectures on ancient Irish history. The men all started telling jokes and the women they got frisky. By 5 o'clock in the evening every bastard there was pesky. Pretty well gone away, there's nothing left to say. Farewell to New York City boys, to Boston and PA. He took them out with a well on cloud and I often heard him say, I'm a free-born man of the USA. He fought the champ in Pittsburgh and he slushed into the ground.
If you liked this conversation, please share it and leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It really helps people find the show. If you'd like an ad-free version of this podcast, consider becoming a paid subscriber at wickedproblems.earth. You'll also get our newsletter, all our show notes, member-only goodies, and you'll be supporting media that wants to tell the stories at the frontier of climate tech, the place where people and politics, technology and capital meet and shape the future. And whether it's one you'd want to live in. Wicked Problems is written and edited by Richard Delavan. Production assistance was provided by me, Theodore Delavan. Wicked Problems, Climate Tech Conversations, is a production of Wicked Problems Limited. Thanks again for listening.
When I said goodbye to you, I remembered how I swore that